Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final episode of Game of Bros for this season. Not overall, but of this first season of, I guess, a show that we've been referring to incorrectly. George R. Martin refers to it as Hot D. Oh, yeah, some Hot D. Speaking of Hot D, on this episode of Game of Bros, I am joined, as always, by Hot D himself, all the way from an island that's not in Westeros. Your friend and mine, Yashar Parasta.
It looks like Westeros if you zoom out enough. And we have arguably just as much dysfunction as the government of King's Landing.
I guess so, yeah. Jesus Christ. Fun times over in the UK. But you're not here to listen to us talk about Rishi Sunak or whoever the fuck you're going to have. Paddy Considine. I heard he's in the running now because he played a fake ruler on TV.
Honestly, Aegon might not be a bad option if Liz Truss is the alternative.
A head of lettuce with googly eyes. That's the true alternative. On this episode, you might be wondering, why are we not doing 10 episodes of this show this season? Well, we went on vacation. We being Yashar, and then also the plurative we. So I was also on vacation. And you know what we both realized after the fact, after watching both of these episodes? It's kind of hard to talk about one without the other, because it would seem some of these episodes are going on at the same time, even. So we're going to be talking about the 9th and 10th episode of the first season of Game of Thrones, Hot D, House of the Dragon. Bam, bam, bam. It was like a dragon air horn, and when its mouth opens, just an air horn.
Well, I mean, we're only here because Vhagar got his D too hot. So
Jesus fucking Christ. So episode 9, The Green Council, aired October 16th, 2022. The Black Queen, the 10th episode, aired the next weekend, October 23rd. The first episode is written by Sarah Hess. Second episode is written by Ryan Condal. And they are named The Green Council and The Black Queen. What happens? Well, these two episodes deal primarily with what happens at King's Landing with the death of Viserys, and then what happens on Dragonstone after the death of Viserys. And boy, when I say that that's where it takes place, that's where those episodes primarily take place, almost entirely. They are split between the two green and black houses of the Targaryens, because that's where this show is headed. Because, I know you messaged this to me earlier today, though I was awake when you messaged me that, which is horrifying. It's been a very long day already. This show went out with a hell of a bang. Even if you have read the source material like I have now, I knew where it was going. I didn't know where it was going to end this season. But boy, if you didn't know where it was going, which I'm assuming you didn't, what a way to end the season, right?
Yeah, no. I think the last two episodes, episode 10, definitely more than 9, were the strongest, some of the strongest of the season. 9 had some issues that we'll get into, as did 10, but I think 10 finally pulled it all together. So it seems like next season we won't have to deal with, I mean, there might be some time jumps, but it won't be years at a time. So I think the biggest issue that plagued this first season, we won't be as much of an issue, and they're just kind of getting into it.
So 9 opens with the death of Viserys, and then it turns out, shocking, to the shock of no one, that Otto Hightower and friends have been planning to seat Aegon as the king, even without what Viserys said, because also, Queen Alicent now believes that there's no way that she actually believed that he meant to talk to her that way, right? It's hard for me to believe that as someone just watching the show, but trying to put myself in her shoes. He didn't say anything specific to her that would make her think that he wasn't maybe just speaking broadly here. I have that question though, right at the top here, because that is the inciting incident almost throughout this entire episode. That's the reason this episode exists the way that it does, is because Viserys at the end of the last episode, and we didn't talk about it on the last episode. That's the other thing. Viserys says the whole, it's a song of ice and fire. Aegon the Conqueror, yada, yada, yada. He was recounting the dream that he's talked about so many times now throughout the season, and Alicent seems to think it's Aegon. I'm asking you, do you genuinely believe she genuinely believes that?
I do. I mean, it's a little much of a stretch to say she's not going to question it, or even the fact there's 2 Aegons currently living, because Rhaenyra's third child is also Aegon. They should stop naming all their kids the same thing. And there's so many Aegons historically. But I will say the one thing that made it kind of silly was the fact that it was being planned anyway. So really The only difference. So as a viewer, I had less trouble accepting because I was okay, at least it gave us some motivation. It's really just motivation for Alicent to now fall in line with everyone else, because it was going to happen. So it's it's not like, hey, if she hadn't heard him say this, all of this conflict would have been avoided, which would have been a little silly. It was, this conflict was probably going to happen, and now at least she's generally aligned, whereas she may have resisted a bit more. And you do see a bit of her resistance throughout the episode too. She's not completely on board with how Otto and the other people want to do it. I mean,
Kristen Cole, baby.
Kristen Cole is just like,
what's his deal, man? You know what? Like, he has quickly become for me the Joffrey of this show. Like, I am waiting for this asshole, and I know he gets his. And the show has shown now that it is going to reinterpret the source material in interesting and sometimes more exciting ways. So I hope to God, however he gets it good. Because boy, Kristen Cole is just like the most despicable piece of shit on this show. On a show with yes,
I think he's not the most.
Yeah, okay, fair, but he's just jerking off to her feet. Okay,
yeah. No, not him.
Okay. Of the characters that are supposed to be upstanding, he is the most terrible. Would you not agree?
Yeah, I would say like at least the other ones that are shitty generally, like they're not hiding it. Whereas like Kristen has this appearance of honor, but he's just turned into like a raging piece of shit. We got some payoff for those balls finally. Like, what are they using them for?
What are the balls for? Well, it's for smashing Beesbury's head against the side of it. Apparently, Kristen Cole just. So it's interesting. You have this meeting of the High Council, who essentially say, the small council, like, hey, by the way, we've been planning this the whole time. Like, ta-da! And Allison's just like, what? Like, I don't understand also how she could be that naive. Like, her dad is the most obvious piece of shit. Like short of Kristen Cole, like he's the most conniving piece of shit on the show, right? Like, I think without a doubt.
Yeah, I guess like with how things ended with Viserys, trying to bring everyone together, and the fact that like she and Rhaenyra sort of reconciled, like maybe like she thought, okay, like yes, he has my side, but ultimately he was one of Viserys' best friends, so he will do what he says. So I think she assumed he was more on the leash than he actually is.
Well, and that's the thing that's weird about this episode is you get the sense, and Allison and Otto spend most of the episode sending their emissaries to find Aegon. So they're not doing much other than existing. We get to see your friend again. Oh my God. Is it Massaria? The white worm?
Oh my goodness.
Good Lord.
The actual fuck.
They gave her a scene across from Rhys Ifans, which is just like, what? Why? Like, of all the times that we've seen her, it's not been great. And then you're putting her against one of the best actors on the show.
MVP performance from her and from her agent. Truly. What is she doing in the and the crazy thing is, I can't tell if her accent is like hers or she's doing something weird. I don't know what's going on. That character is horrible, but I guess she's a means to an end. And then we get the Eric Bros.
Well, and it feels like a strange payoff because I'm assuming the people who write the show, Condell and George R. R. Martin, everybody else, that moment when we find out she's the white worm, that's supposed to be like, isn't that supposed to be like a big moment, but like, you're the white worm. Like,
yeah,
you've had this character show up 2 other times. Her interactions with Daemon did not have any bearing on anything. And now we're supposed to care. Like, feels like a little bit too late. Like, should have been introduced maybe at that halfway point.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one of the biggest problems I had with the episode was like the Tricia her and the Eric Bros that have the same name, but it's like thanks subtitles spelled slightly differently. Like I didn't even remember seeing them before, but I guess we've seen them maybe once. One bro watches over. He's basically Kristen Cole for Aegon, and the other one is kind of a generic soldier. And so you did have like these pretty important roles just kind of thrust onto you. And then you have Otto talking to this person who we've seen a few times, but like it kind of, I think if it wasn't for her like horrible acting, you wouldn't even realize. You're like, oh, this is just like a random person.
Right.
And like, oh, actually, I recognize this horrible performance. And then he sends Aemond and
No. The Queen sends Aemond and Kristen Cole. Otto sends the Eric brothers, which we have seen, I think, at some point, and they will, like, obviously it should be obvious now that they're given names and doing things. They will play a bigger part in this story, but I agree. It feels like the show has backloaded introducing people all of a sudden, which, I mean, again, this is a very long narrative that they're telling here, and it's a very complex narrative with a lot of characters. So I understand why they've waited, but I think they waited too long to kind of open the world up a little bit. And they kind of did that in this episode, because the hunt for Aegon takes up half of the episode, and they're going around Flea Bottom. We find out that Aemond was taken to a brothel when he was like a kid by Aegon.
Aegon watches Kitty Fight Club and maybe has some Kitty Fight Club babies. I mean, Aegon's just a piece of shit is what they're really beating us over the head with.
And the Eric brothers say as much. The one is like, you know, they're both his Kingsguard, but one of them is his actual Kingsguard, and I think the other one is just a Kingsguard.
Yeah, the one who's directly in charge of protecting him actually seems to be much less supportive of him. He's kind of like,
yo, this guy's a fucking clown.
And even Aemon's like, you know, I've been able to study history and philosophy and, you know, have slight sociopathic tendencies, whereas Aegon is just a piece of shit.
Well, and it's interesting, they actually kind of like humanize Aemond a little bit. I know, again, like, I feel like that's kind of hard given that he looks so goddamn dastardly. They cast someone. I don't want to make like bearings on actors, obviously, because he's not, you know, obviously he's not an actual human being who's killing other humans and having his dragon eat them. But the actor that they cast for Aemond is just, he looks the part. Right.
Oh, very punchable face.
He looks, I think I said this on the last episode, he looks more like Matt Smith than Matt Smith does now.
Yeah. I mean, he might be older than Matt Smith now.
Well, and that's the other thing about this episode is it's interesting that they kind of humanize Aemond a little bit, but I don't have a good read on Aegon yet as a character, and I know that that's going to change in the later seasons of this show, but like all we know is he's terrible. That's it. Like we know nothing other than he's terrible. Like
he's terrible, treats his wife like shit, rapes women.
Is also his sister.
Sister goes to Kitty Fight Club, doesn't want to rule until the end of the episode where he kind of, I think, likes the attention is kind of what we see.
Right.
Once
reluctant ruler. Again, these reluctant Targaryen rulers like Viserys, who's a complete reluctant ruler.
But Viserys never sought out like adoration outside of his family. Like that's what he just wanted his own family to love him. He didn't really care so much if the people did. I mean, not that he was like bad to people, like that wasn't what drove him. Whereas I think that brief moment where Aegon is crowned, we're like, oh, this guy, he's had a taste of this. And I don't think he's going to want to give it up now, even though he at first didn't seem like he wants it.
Well, right, because the entire episode is them trying to drag his ass in because he doesn't want anything to do with being king. And hey, I think that's an interesting idea worth mining and kind of getting into. I just didn't give it enough time. Like we see it in the span of 5 scenes. He goes from not wanting to be king to, I guess he wants to be king now. Like, I mean, pretty fast.
Maybe they deep dive in it more next season. I don't know. My guess is he's going to be all in, but perhaps we see him struggle with the transition. I mean, we just don't know because we don't know. And this episode is purely from like the Green's perspective. We don't have any Rhaenyra, any of like the Dragonstone crew, I don't think, in it.
Well, we have
Rhaenys.
Hey, best character in this show, baby. I'm telling you. Other than when she's walking around in King's Landing with that hoodie on, where it looks ridiculous because there are very few people who have that hairstyle other than rich people in this world. But okay.
And then Rhaenys is like held in King's Landing. Alicent says, "Join us." You know, Rhaenyra's not suited, basically. And then Rhaenys is like, "I keep my oaths, even though I think Rhaenyra killed my son." Blah, blah,
well, and
blah,
also
blah.
She's like, Alicent, by the way, like you're still doing the men's dirty work. Like,
yeah, that was an interesting conversation where she's like, I think you're sort of being an independent woman, but really you're just, what'd she say? Like, putting a window into their influence. I don't know.
Well, you're putting a window. You're just building a window in a prison. Like instead of it being a prison with 4 walls, it's a prison with a window. Like that's, and in a lot of ways, I really appreciate that the conversation that Rhaenys had with Rhaenyra is being echoed 8 episodes later. Because remember, and they showed previously on Game of Thrones. They showed it like a bunch. That was like half of the previously on was just that conversation being recapped. But I'm glad that they really came full circle with it. And now it's like, you know what, Allison, you are just as bad as everybody else. You are doing exactly what everybody else expects you to do and is telling you to do. And like, I know that the character's obviously in a very hard place because of it's her kids and it was her husband and blah, 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 blah. I get it. But I like that conversation has come full circle and not with the original character it was being talked to about, essentially the opposite or the kind of only other character that Rhaenys could really have the conversation with at this point in the show. Yeah.
And then there's also they have the conversation, but still, and Alicent does want to like have a peaceful transition with Rhaenyra, and then her and Otto have differing things where Otto's like, we just gotta, we can give them like one really hard offer where they basically have to bend the knee or we'll just kill them. And she's like, no, I want to like hash it out and blah, blah, blah. And the whole state, them each sending their own crew to go get Aegon was kind of silly to me because I was like,
I agree.
Isn't he just coming back anyway? I mean, I know Otto could say something to him before Alicent could, but I just found that a little, it was like a manufactured tension.
It's very binary. It's either he's going to go with what Alicent thinks or with what Otto thinks. And apparently he has no autonomy of his own in between.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was kind of
like they were trying to do the thing at the end of the first season of Game of Thrones where it's like, Joffrey, don't kill Ned Stark. It's like they were trying to do that, but there was no payoff here because like after the 10th episode, we know where this is going to go. Like it's not even, the decision is not even being, the decision and the pieces of the decision are being made exterior from Aegon as well at this point, like by the next episode. So it's like, I don't understand why it matters who found him. That it almost felt like in a way they were trying to figure out a way to make this episode more exciting than it had to be. Cause I will tell you, I don't remember this from the narrative, the written narrative. Doesn't mean it wasn't in there. Doesn't mean it didn't happen because again, there's unreliable narrators throughout that, but it felt a little just kind of, given where we go with the next episode and given what we actually know is going on, they're keeping the death of the king secret so that they can get their pieces in motion. I don't know. And then the whole conversation with the White Worm really, it was weird because she goes, the people only give you as much power as we're willing to give it. It's like, not in this universe, they don't. And we've never seen that. Like, we've never seen that, even in the original series. And now we're not going to see it in this series because this is not what this series is about. And it's weird that they bring that up because, like, if you're saying that, you're fucking delusional.
Well, also, I think the people of Westeros don't, like, fully realize the power of the dragons either, right? Because they're generally not used. Like, they say, I think, they've mentioned a few times, like, in the season, they're not battle tested, these dragons. They have them and people but yeah, the people.
When dragons go to war, everything burns. That's what they said. Yeah. Like it's a 0-sum game when you have dragons.
Yeah. And then there's also sort of on the other side of the White Worm or whatever her name is, there's Larys's foot fetish conversation with the queen, where he's playing both sides because he gives her the information about, where he thinks Aegon is and how she's being potentially used. And then he's also kind of talking to Otto to say like, hey, I'm your man. Like if you need to talk about stuff. So he's just obviously a very self-serving, opportunistic person. So it's not even his loyalty really isn't even to Alicent anymore. It's to whoever.
It's to himself.
Is in charge. Yeah.
Well, and he also tells Otto where Aegon is. Or how to get a hold of the White Worm and everything. Like he knew. Exactly. So I like his character. It's very Littlefinger. It's very Varys from the first run of the show. Again, he seems a little omniscient in a very convenient way. Like I think you and I probably both have similar issues with these kinds of characters where it's like, what are their limitations? Like, what can't they do? Because it seems like he knows literally everything.
He can't come without a little skin on the feet.
Yes. Okay. Like that is not in the book. And that feels like something that should have been in the book because that's fucking hilarious. The him jerking off to her feet thing.
Did you not see in the credits it said rewrites by Quentin Tarantino?
Oh, that's what I thought. He pulled a real hard Tarantino in this episode.
Yeah. So
I was like, what is he doing? And then he just stuck his hand down his pants. I was like, he's jerking off to her feet.
Well, I mean, first I was like, okay, she's putting her feet up, she's just chilling, and then you like see her take it down. And you're like, oh, he's a foot guy, and then
on the nose, wouldn't you think? A little on the toe.
And then it all culminates, they find Aegon, bring him, they want to crown him in front of as many people as possible. So they do it in like the dragon pit.
Yeah. Why are they crowning him in front of as many people as possible?
Make it legitimate.
Well, to make it appear legitimate. Again,
legitimate, yeah.
Again, this entire episode is about keeping up appearances, right? Keeping up the appearance of, that Aegon's not completely fucking insane, that he is the rightful king. Again, there are people that do not believe that Alicent actually heard what Viserys said. So she has to keep up the appearances of that as well. Like,
Yeah, and even when actually they bring a lot of the houses back to swear oaths to Aegon, like some of them are just like, we don't really care. Like they want the male dominated version. So it's like irrelevant. And then the few that do show dissent, basically Otto kills them or has them banished. It makes it tough to say no. Like, and so his point is, all right, let's do this to Aegon in front of the masses. We know generally people would prefer a male heir. It's what we've been told. So we don't think there'll be a whole lot of pushback. And then if we show the whole song and dance in front of all of the people, it's less, if Rhaenyra comes in, it's going to be much harder to say, well, he's not the king because we watched him be crowned.
And then they did their best, the best tribute I've ever seen to the finale of Shrek, with some high quality CGI.
There's some good memes about that.
Yeah. So Rhaenys gets let go by one of the Eric brothers, Eric with an E, and they get separated. She goes into the dragon pit because we need to have a POV character in the dragon pit. With the coronation happening, she kind of disappears for a while. You forget about her, and then all of a sudden, she just starts killing people. Starts killing people of King's Landing.
She bursts out on her dragon. I don't remember her dragon's name. And that dragon, Meleys, just fucking wipes out. Got to be at least in the hundreds. How
many people fell into the dragon pit and just died? Right.
And then you're like, okay, so she's going to, she could just end the conflict right there, right? And
I was just waiting for the show just ends.
Okay. The dragon roars in front of like Aegon and Alicent, basically all the Greens, and she doesn't pull the trigger. There's part of me thinking like, is she, I don't know, does she feel like a guilt because she knows like Alicent maybe isn't a like horrible person? Is there like a piece of she doesn't want to kill people? But I'm like, well, it can't be a killing thing because like she just literally murdered tons of innocents. But I think life of peasants is cheap in this universe. So
you think?
Well, just in this universe.
It's a weird part of the episode because even Ryan Condal said it after the episode. He's like, people might question why she didn't do anything, but at the time it makes sense. And they do kind of clarify why. I think they should never have put this in the show. It undercuts like Rhaenys as a character. Genuinely, I believe the way she was written in the book, if she had been put in that position, because this is not in the book, this is only in the show, that character in the book would have fucking roasted those dudes, period. I you know what I mean? Like it's not a question. Like you can end it right there. You can not only end it right there, you could end it and make it very clear that this never happens again in the same stroke. Like nobody in their right mind, even if you're risk averse to Machiavellian ways of doing anything, you would not disagree that there's no way that you don't just pull the trigger right then and there. If you're genuinely concerned with the way the realm is headed, which it seems like she was, I know that, I don't want to kill somebody else's kids. Like you shouldn't give a shit. You shouldn't.
And it, because it's like, it's put there as like a cool. It is a cool show.
It's supposed to be cool. It's just for cool. It's the cult of cool.
It's cool. It's cool. And then it's just like sometimes stuff says it's just because the plot needs it, and that's what they decided. Like it may not be the most rational thing to do, but it's we'll come up with a reason for it. Sort of. I think if she hadn't killed tons of people, I could have bought it more. I think it's just hard to be like, okay, she's okay with just icing all of these people. and then sort of scaring. And we actually don't really see what the Green's response to that is, because we don't see them at all in the finale besides Aemon. So, I think it's just one of those things that's where we have suspension of disbelief. We just have to accept it. Probably not the cleanest writing choice. I think that, along with the Eric and the Kristen Aemon tag finding Aegon, were probably the weakest parts of the episode. In an overall interesting episode that had really good dialogue, definitely set the stakes of where the show's going to go. And, it's not perfect. It is noticeable. I'm
not a huge fan of writing things. I'm not a fan of putting things in just because they seem cool or they look cool. Like, I get that. I get that the show.
So you're not going to go see Black Adam this weekend,
right? Because I don't give a shit if it just looks cool. So it's just not enough. And what it is when it doesn't get in the way of logic. Like in Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, it looks cool when Legolas slides down the stairs on a shield, right? But it also serves a purpose. He's getting down the stairs. He's just doing it in a cool way. And this, it's like, so she bursts out of the pit and does what? Just leaves? Like it's added for dramatic effect, but it undercuts the actual tension of the show entirely. Because the rest of the show, most people are just going to be like, why didn't she just kill him? Like, I hope at some point that comes back into the story where it's like, you could have just killed them and stopped all of this.
And it's
unbelievably stupid in a really hard to stomach way.
Yeah. And to minor spoilers, they sort of broach it in the next episode in a way that's a little bit more palatable, but still
that feels like them just glossing over it. Like that in the next episode is even more glossing over it than in this episode.
It makes it better in retrospect, but still is problematic. And once again, the issue is how it's done. If she had sort of just burst outside of it, no one really got hurt, you could say, okay, she just kind of wants to get out of there. The fact that like her dragon was there, they could smell 5-day-old sushi on its breath.
Yeah.
And she just decided out of pity, it is, some of them are family, right? Because she is Targaryen blood, and like, you're not supposed to kill family. That is sort of like the highest of crimes. Maybe there's something there, but as a viewer, that's not made clear to us, especially because she sort of disappears. It's just, she's supposed to be cool and badass. Look at her dragon. She's also going to be the one that tells our homies in Dragonstone what's going on in Westeros or in King's Landing.
Yeah, Again, it wasn't in the source material, so it wasn't a problem there. They added it to the show, and I feel like them adding it was just, I think like you said, it's just, it looked cool. And that's, if it looks cool, that's one thing, but it got in the way of a genuine tension filled moment, because again, there are going to be people that just remember this moment in the show as like, what a stupid fucking thing to do with this. Like, it feels like a moment where if the show doesn't land it, like I'll look back at this moment in the show and be like, this is the start of really dumb things that they started doing. It feels like just a very Game of Thrones season 7 or 8. You know what I mean?
It's like they needed to get us to a certain point. And I will say, they will get us to that point, but it wasn't this.
Right.
It was still a really good episode and probably one of the better episodes of the season.
Oh yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. It's just a couple stupid things that when you think of the magnitude of the impact they have, it was actually, for me, a similar thing to like when Rhaenyra tells Alicent, well, why don't our kids just marry each other? And then problem solved. And Alicent's just like, no. And I'm like, well, you solved the show right there.
Right. Well, and they could have solved it right here too. It's just, whatever. Like, I hope that it's made clear at some point in the show that the Greens are not going to hesitate to pull the trigger to kill the Targaryens of the Blacks, like the Black Targaryens or whatever the hell they're referring to themselves as. Like, because it's been made clear to the Greens that the Black Targaryens are going to hesitate. And you know what? In the next episode, what does Daemon say? Wishes don't make kings, dragons do. It's that same thing. It's like, you've got dragons. Like, just fucking use them. Like, just use them.
But I think overall, I really like the episode, and I think it really it matches the sort of the yin yang dynamic of the finale.
Because it's a 2-part finale, I think. Really.
Yeah, and I think I like I know the finale is a better episode, but they do mesh well, and it puts you, and it leaves you saying, okay, well, where are these people's heads going to be at once things start, because we never see Alicent and Rhaenyra interact again after the dinner,
No.
which is, so that'll be interesting.
And I don't know when they're going to interact again. Realistically, there's a lot of distance physically that separates them, but now it's going to be even more emotional distance.
And we're definitely getting like a softening of Alicent. Like we see she's like, I want this because I genuinely think she believes it, like is what Viserys wanted, but she doesn't want to physically hurt Rhaenyra or her family. So, and from my understanding, like in the book, it's more, they didn't have the friendship, right? We've spoken about that, but it's just more of like, I want power. I know I want power. And like, we're getting a softening of both sides. Like Alicent, we're now like, okay, she's not this like bloodthirsty kind of just angry person that we saw a few episodes ago. Like she wants to do things the right way. And like Rhaenyra, we've been kind of being primed to be more of the hero because she generally is a little less conniving, minus the brother or the uncle incest. So I think the show's just trying to make us a little bit more sympathetic to the two sides, although Aegon just seems like an unrepentant piece of shit. So like really we just feel bad for Alicent, not for any of her kids that are in the orbit. Whereas I think on Rhaenyra's side, we feel a little bit more for the children too.
Well, and the other thing, like you've kind of mentioned in the source material, Rhaenyra is a lot more, like you said, kind of just power hungry. They all are. They're painted kind of less positively in the book. It's very matter of fact, which again, like you wouldn't root for those characters on the show the way that they are. Cause it's like we've already talked about, this show is effectively in a lot of ways like Hitler and Mussolini and all these other like terrible, mass murderers all hanging out together and trying to figure out who's worse than the other. It's what it feels like, right? It's the psychopaths, all of them essentially, and like we mentioned with the thing in the dragon pit, like the world at large doesn't seem to really matter. We actually get to see the world at large in this previous episode and in the finale. We get to see more of the world at large than we've seen at all in this show. But I think that next season it's going to have to show the world. I think they made that pretty clear even.
Yeah, I think we start to see a little bit of that. And I think it has to be because the stakes are now beyond just conversation.
Right. The stakes have the impact on the rest of the world, not just the Targaryens and their little corner of the kingdom. So the next episode, The Black Queen, opens with Rhaenys coming from King's Landing to Dragonstone and saying, "Hey, your dad's dead." And Rhaenyra goes into childbirth because
the fourth labor scene of the season. Holy fucking shit. Do we not need another one of these? And
this one, it's her body
gross.
Attacking itself. That's what they said. That's what Miguel Sapochnik and Ryan Condal said. It's her body attacking itself during her moment of, it's like, shut up, guys. You don't get to do this 4 times this season. Like, you should have done it twice, maybe.
Every other episode, you have like a traumatic, Rhaenyra had one like not traumatic, but still birth scene. Like, it was totally beating it. I mean, yes, that was the worst of all the birth scenes because she just rips a baby fucking out of her and it's gross. But do we have to see like bloody and this is coming from someone who, like, I'm a psychopath. Like I watch all kinds of like fucked up movies and stuff like that. But I was just like, this just seems a little masturbatory.
Well, it's just they're trying to really like beat home the point of like, she's a woman and she's in a moment of immense emotional and physical pain giving birth, but the world is continuing without her. It's like, God, that's so on the nose. Like, what? Like again, really?
I'm not saying don't have her miscarry or whatever. You can have it, but it doesn't need to be like 10 minutes long, like with incredibly graphic detail.
I just don't think it. I understand what purpose it serves for the narrative, but I think for me, it's just like, do it once and then again, do it once with her mom at the beginning of the season and once with her at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Like the conversation with Rhaenys and Rhaenyra at the beginning of the season and Rhaenys and Alicent. Like, you don't have to do it 5 times to make it impactful. You only really need to do it two times.
Yeah. There's a Shia LaBeouf movie with what's the Vanessa Kirby, like won a bunch of awards. It's like Something of a Woman, about like a couple that has a really like loses a baby and like the movie is her birth scene. It's really intense. And I was like, I feel like I'm watching this movie over again.
I mean, I appreciate what they're getting at and what the message of the scene is supposed to be, but the scene's emotional weight is undercut by the show itself just doing it so many times. Like, again, I have no problem seeing it. Like, no problem seeing a woman giving birth. None of that. I have no issue with that. That's not the issue. The issue is utilizing it 2 other times when you're trying to make a point. And it's like, like you said, I don't need to hear you you need a new song and dance here. Sing another tune. Stop singing the same tune 4 times.
Yeah, and Daemon is like nowhere to be seen, and it's like, is it because he's traumatized from the last time, but they've had kids, or Daemon kind of becomes the growth we saw from him is basically completely disregarded because he immediately is kind of like, he's essentially now the analog to Otto Hightower, where he's, as soon as he hears that Viserys has died, he's like, oh, definitely was killed. I'm like, dude, the dude was like half melted.
Did you see what he looked like? Like, he's literally like a skeleton with skin, bro. You helped him up to the throne not 2 episodes ago.
Yeah, and so he's like immediately pushing Rhaenyra to war, much like Otto was pushing Alicent. And so you see like they each have these like really trusted advisors, and he's not even really there when she needs him. Like, he's trying to like rally the troops, and Rhaenyra tells her sons, like, no one does a fucking thing until I say. And Daemon's, he's got a little John Bolton in him. He's very hawkish. He's trying to stir the pot, and he just wants to go to war and rally the troops. And he's like, we have all the dragons, and I think he says they have 14 to their dragons to the 3. They starts listing all these dragon names. I'm like, I don't know who the fuck these dragons are, but sure, sounds good.
I didn't even mention the cannibal. That's one of the ones on Dragonstone. There's a dragon called the Cannibal that just like roams around, because he mentions like 3 untamed dragons, and one of them just roams around Dragonstone. It's called the Cannibal. Eat
other dragons.
Do what? I don't know all of them. I know. I know the ones that they've mentioned, because the ones that they've mentioned before, but the ones that they haven't mentioned are now being mentioned finally, like the rogue again, like essentially rogue dragons. So I think it's interesting. I mean, it's not surprising that Daemon is we've always known that Daemon is kind of an unrepentant piece of shit, but he's kind of had this opportunity in a couple episodes to kind of show a softer side, but I don't think anybody for a moment buys that he is not just terrible through and through, but like, again, terrible with like, he's like that friend that we all have, that just like a terrible person, but he's loyal to you. So I kind of don't care because he's loyal to me, but I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end if I wasn't the friend he was loyal to. That's Daemon's. Same with Otto. It's kind of like you're loyal to almost to a fault. And like, but some people want that on their side, and I understand why, but they also tend to give bad advice because they're just like constantly worried that somebody is out to get them.
Yeah. And he's just so reactionary. He just wants, I don't know, I think he wants to rule in a very specific power dominated way. And Rhaenyra is like, no, my dad wants me it wasn't so much he wants me to sit on the Iron Throne. He wants me to rule the realm and bring them together. And maybe what I should do is, not escalate, because then we have 2 scenes before, like her and 2 scenes after the birth, but before like the planning. One echoes the bridge scene in Dragonstone when Rhaenyra went up to get the dragon egg from Daemon all those years ago. But you have Otto coming to say, hey, here's an offer. We can avoid bloodshed. And Daemon's like, fuck you. I'm going to murder you right now. And Rhaenyra's like, chill. And actually, much like she did years ago, she stays Daemon, and they go back to consider it. And then the other thing is our favorite Valerion, Corlys, is brought back, and he wakes up and after his mortal injury with Rhaenyra, and she's like, where the fuck have you been the last 6 years? And he's like, yeah, I fucked up. Like, you were right about everything. Let's just go chill. And she's like, no.
Not anymore. You had your chance, pal.
Yeah. And she's like, we're rolling with Rhaenyra. And I think her saying that is because she does see, even with all the pressure that Daemon and others are putting around her, Rhaenyra's instinct isn't to go to war. And this is what I was saying in about previous episodes. Like, we've seen the softening. Like, it's effective in the sense that like she actually is honoring her father, but it's also like, okay, maybe we're supposed to think the fact that she's even considering accepting some offer of not pursuing the throne to avoid bloodshed shows that like we should be rooting for her quote unquote side in this conflict.
Well, and so that's the funny thing, and that's kind of the thing we haven't mentioned yet, is who should we be rooting for in this conflict? Because as far as I'm concerned, and I think you would agree, I think the show has presented us with two camps. You could cheer for or be more invested in Alicent and her kids and Aemond and Aegon and what's going on at King's Landing, or you could be more invested in Dragonstone. I think that it's kind of setting up kind of the audience to choose a side in a lot of ways. And I think that that's exciting because at the same time, you're giving us what these now kind of more firmly defined lines. I think it's going to be more interesting to see who lines up where and how. And we're starting to see that with this episode already at the end of this first season.
And I think the key distinction is not even just Rhaenyra's temperament, but also like her kids just seem like quite normal and reasonable and like
more normal than jerking off out of the window of King's Landing.
Yeah, whereas Aegon and Aemon just like there's nothing to really like about them.
Right, which I mean, I think it's a little unfair too because Aemond is kind of humanized in this episode a little bit.
Is he?
Again, like I think it will all come out in the wash of next season to see what Aemond's response to what he did is and how like because he can either say like, well, it was an accident, or he can be like, yeah, fucking I killed him and do so what of it? Like I'm riding the biggest dragon. Like, of course I killed him. He was no match for me. But like it's interesting because like you said, like even with someone like Aemond, they're trying to soften him a little bit. I don't know how successful they are, and I don't know how successful they realistically wanted to be either. But I think it's interesting to see kind of the show is giving you lines to like lines in the sand where people are standing, and it's also fleshing some of these characters out in more interesting ways than I was expecting.
And we'll get to that part in a bit. Just want to go back real quick on the Rhaenys thing. So we've mentioned, she doesn't ice the greens. She says like, I don't, I will fight with you, but I don't want to be the one that starts the war. And the thing that makes it a little more palatable is Rhaenyra is actually also there where she's like, I wouldn't have wanted you to do that, like, because I want to consider a peaceful thing. So I said like, it makes it a bit more palatable because actually from this episode, if what happens at the very end doesn't happen, it actually does seem like Rhaenyra may have come to some sort of like diplomatic agreement. And
it doesn't matter though,
No, it doesn't matter anymore.
Ultimately doesn't matter. So I agree with you. I think they were doing it just for the benefit of maybe this episode to be like, well, she might want to, but like, I think we're going to see a very different Rhaenyra next season. Like genuinely, I think we're going to see the character closer to the one from the book, more palatable for audiences on TV, not a complete walking nightmare. But I do think we're going to see a much angrier, less level-headed character next season. Don't you?
Yeah, I think so.
Look at her face at the end of the season, man.
Yeah.
She's fucking pissed.
Yeah. And
in like a way we haven't seen her character be almost at all this entire show. Like it's interesting because like where this season has taken us with her character is very transformative, and it's transformative up until the final frame of this season.
And you think about like when she kind of she takes the offer and talks to Daemon about it. Daemon like attacks her, he chokes her, and I'm like, at that point, I was like, what the fuck, Daemon? Because I mean, I know he's not a character that's incapable of that, but with Rhaenyra, that hasn't really been shown.
And she's also the queen.
Yeah, and she's also the queen, and she explains the song of Ice and Fire, and he clearly hasn't.
She doesn't explain it to him.
Well,
she says to him like
she
talks to him like he knows about it. And part of the reason he flips out at her, I believe part of the reason he flips out at her is because Viserys didn't tell him.
Well, it's I think a couple of reasons. A, it's like, oh, she's just a fucking other Viserys. Like the things I thought my brother was basically a weenie for. Like right. My wife is doing this, and he says, dreams didn't make us kings, dragons did. And he just sees these dragons as this brute force. Like, we have more dragons. Let's just go fucking burn everything. And Rhaenyra's like, I don't want to. And it echoes actually what happens with Daenerys at the end of Game of Thrones season 8. Like, I don't want to just rule Ash. Like, yes, I have dragons, but if we just go use them, there's no point. I'm not holding the realm together. I'm just murdering everyone.
Right.
And
everything will burn.
And then what's the point of ruling over that? And she actually, it's like almost like smiles or sneers. Like, even though he attacks her, she likes that Viserys told her something that Daemon didn't know about. But it's going to be interesting to see how their relationship moves on, because he wasn't there for the birth. He was kind of like maneuvering behind her back, and he wants her to fight. But also the end of this episode shows that she's probably going to want to fight. So I'm interested to see what direction they take that. But yeah, Daemon, despite showing some growth, is still a shithead. And I mean, Matt Smith's great, but I don't think he'll ever be someone we can be like, oh, he's sort of good now. He's like, no, he's not.
And it's I'm honestly surprised at how much they keep bringing up the Song of Ice and Fire, man. Like, it honestly, that feels like a pointed response to Benioff and Weiss and the way that they fucked up that last show, because it's like, no. We're making this important to our show, and I don't know what this show may even tie into the Jon Snow show. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know where they're going with this, but they're making this very clear that there may be more going on here. Like, and
it's like this piece of, I guess, for lack of a better term, like long-termism that like politicians in our current environment lack, politicians in like these shows lack, where it's like this like long-term actual good for the realm and the people is what grounds Rhaenyra and is actually what's driving her decision-making process. So I think they're using it to also help them ground her and make her like more of a well-rounded character. And it fits. Like it's not like it feels like ham-fisted, because it makes sense,
right,
that the Targaryens would know this, and this would be the underlying, I guess, fundamental to how they rule, like what they look towards, rather than just accumulating power and whatnot. So I've actually liked how that's kind of centered Rhaenyra's decision making.
I agree, and I also like, it's funny. Like, the one thing we kind of haven't mentioned is like, this show should just be called Game of Thrones, a comedy of errors, because it would seem that the only reason they're going to war is by accident, effectively. Which I'm not sure how I feel about that, because it feels a little wonky, where it's like, well, he didn't mean to kill him, and he didn't mean to say it was Alicent. He actually meant Rhaenyra. He just didn't know, and she's taking it that way. And it's like, come on, show. Like, I'm glad that I'm glad in the Green Council episode, the Small Council was like, no,
we're doing it anyways.
We've been doing this shit anyways. Like, I appreciate that in hindsight even more now, because it's like, well, this was happening either way. Like, I appreciate that, because otherwise it would feel like a little dorky, just like a plot convenience. Yeah, like, oh, I didn't mean to, and you didn't mean to, and the messenger's note got lost and it slipped it. It's like, oh, nothing is this ever this fucking convenient. Like, please.
And then so we have the point where now, like, Rhaenyra is like, and even Daemon's agreed, like, let's see who's on our side. We have a lot of bannermen that have sworn to us, but some of them have gone back to the Greens. Before we even consider engaging in conflict, let's just see like what our numbers are. Or, my guess is Rhaenyra wants to use it more as a negotiating tactic to say, hey, we have this many houses, you have this many houses. Like, is it worth it for us to like go to blows over this? So in maybe her not mother of the year moment, she sends her kids to one to Storm's End,
and the other one to Winterfell.
Super cool, Winterfell, which I think that's going to play a lot in the next season.
I'm going to be interested to see who they cast as Cregan Stark, given that he, like, I believe, if memory serves, he's like 14. Like, he's like like she mentions to her son.
He's closer to Jace's age.
Yeah. But I'm curious to see who they cast, because it'll be interesting, because a lot of stuff happens at Winterfell with Jacaerys. So, and then, then Lucerys.
And then before we get to In the Dragon, there's one other dragon piece. So she wants to send them to go basically just as messengers. She makes them swear. She seems to be a much better mother, though, like as far as controlling her children, than Alicent, where she's like, you guys are just going as messengers. Having the dragons will just, show you mean business, but don't engage, don't do anything. We're just, saying, hey, here's our oath that you gave to me. Like, are you going to uphold it? And then also simultaneously, we see Daemon going, and from reading online, apparently that's Jaehaerys's dragon that was somewhere on Dragonstone. I forgot the dragon's name. And I guess he's now trying to bond with that one. It was kind of a weird scene because it had no context, but my reading online, that's what it is. It's the Jaehaerys's dragon.
Vermithor.
Vermithor.
But Vermithor is as big as Vhagar, which is why he's going and waking Vermithor up.
I see.
Because, by the way, we really get to see in this episode how fucking big Vhagar is.
And my heart was actually beating fast the whole Storm's End scene. So she sends Jace and Luke off, and we see Luke going to Storm's End. And as soon as I was like, we're spending a lot of time with this guy that we haven't, and I was like, this is not going to end well.
This ain't going to end well, baby. And when he lands at Storm's End and that lightning shot. Oh, and with the dragon. Whew.
And Vhagar looks basically like Godzilla. Like, it was very reminiscent of Godzilla to me. You see him or her. You see Vhagar raise her head, and he goes in to give the note, and Aemon's already there. Not to fight him, but he just happens to be there at the same time, and he has this cool, like, sapphire eye. And he gives the note to, I can't remember the Baratheon's name, but...
Boros Baratheon.
Boros, who clearly can't read, so he has to call the Maester. And I got very, like, strong, like, Russell Crowe vibes from him, you know? And then he's like, no, he's like, they've already come to me. They've offered me a bride or a husband, for one of my daughters.
Aemon. They've offered me Aemon, essentially.
Aemon. And Luke's like, I don't know. Luke's like, I'm a child. I don't know. Like, I don't even know how to negotiate because, like, I just come to get a message, and Aemon kind of does the thing again where he's like, I'm going to take your eye. Give me your eye. I mean, what comes next is an accident, yes, but Aemon is still like a bloodthirsty bully and would have taken his eye. So it's not like it's a little sad, but he's still a shithead. If you and then they're like, the Baratheons are like, this is not going to happen. The guest policy, shout outs to the homie at the Red Wedding, is going to be upheld, and there's going to be no bloodshed in my house. So he basically rejects it, but fine. Luke gets on his dragon, and it's really storming, and he's like going out there, and you just kind of feel so uncomfortable, and like my heart's like beating fast, and I was like, shit, this is not gonna go well. And you just see Vhagar basically right above, is it Araxes? Arax, and it's just like, holy, like we knew Vhagar was big, but like we didn't really have context for how big he was. I think Arax is also a little bit on the smaller side, like not fully grown, but Vhagar is just so huge. And actually, in my mind, I was thinking, well, I would think Arax is at least much more nimble and like probably could be able to outmaneuver, like
which they do I think they do a really good job of giving us an idea of what we're in for. Like this was like a little aperitif of what the show is going to become. Yeah, with the dragons and the dragon fighting and stuff. Because it's not that the dragon fights aren't that exciting, but like you can imagine what they're going to be: giant dragons fighting each other in the air. Like it's going to be a lot. And this scene, I think, sets the stage for what this show is going to become, what the show is going to be doing a lot of here in the next 4 seasons from the sounds of it, because it sounds like they're doing a 5-season run of the show. I hope that we get more of this because this was fucking great. Like this was one of the best things this show, this season, or this iteration or the previous iteration. One of the best sequences of this entire show. I
think the whole like Storm's End is like top.
From the moment he's pulling into Storm's End, it is full of tension, and you're just you instinctually know he's not going to get away. You're just hoping. And they even do a good job of like giving you that moment of like, oh, never mind.
And so he runs away from Vhagar and gets into like these small cliffs, and Aemon's like, fuck it, I'll let him go. But then actually Luke loses control of his dragon because the dragon's scared and fights back. Because I think we forget, like the dragons are living creatures, right?
Right.
So, and there's a quote that I wrote down that Viserys said in like one of the first episodes, the idea we control dragons is an illusion. And that comes to play here. They can control them in the context of like the dragons won't kill them and they'll generally listen to them, but they are, push comes to shove, the dragon doesn't have to listen to you. And so
it's like a horse.
Yeah, exactly. Luke comes back.
A horse that breathes fire. It's like 30 times the size of a horse.
Yeah. It's not an airplane, right? You don't pull up, it pulls up. Like you hope it pulls up. It generally will pull up, but it won't always. And so Eryx comes back, shoots the fire in Vhagar's face, and then it really irritates Vhagar. It doesn't hurt him, and they go off into the calm, and you're seeing Amos trying to say like, this is not worth it, like Vhagar, like chill, and then Vhagar just fucking eats Eryx with a little sprinkling of Luke on there, and you see the like pieces just fall, like the 2 of the wings are just like pieces falling out of his mouth into the water, and you're like, holy fuck. And you see Aemon is like, shit, like I've gone too far. I could poke out his eye and probably not provoke a war, but I just fucking murdered him on accident.
I think poking out the eye would have still provoked a war, don't you?
I think poking out eye may have. And I think it may have, but he didn't want to kill. Like, once again, it doesn't just. He's still not a good person. He's a shitty person who was at worst bullying him and he's a bully. Like, he was just bullying.
Yeah. And what was he supposed to do? I mean, there was no way for him to get away. Like, that was.
Yeah.
They lost control of their dragons, I guess.
I mean, yes, and
they did,
and it shows us how next season, if they're going to be doing full-out dragon warfare, it's not going to go as smoothly as either side wants.
Right. Right. Oh, completely.
Because you can't control them. Like, especially like when the dragons, like, there's nothing bad happening, the dragons will generally listen to you. But if like the dragons have their own like feelings of self-preservation, then maybe things aren't going to go the way you think. And we saw Aemon's face, and is he going to go like tuck his tail home to mommy and be like, I really fucked up? And even if they apologize, obviously Rhaenyra's probably not going to take it. Or is he just going to say like, fuck it, I did it. Let me at least like pretend I wanted to do it intentionally. It seems like in the book, it seems like it was more intentional. Where in the show, it's more accidental. So, and we just won't know until next season. But it just ends with Rhaenyra finding out, and she's clearly, my guess is, not thinking about diplomatic solutions anymore.
Probably not.
But it also shows she shouldn't have sent her fucking like 10-year-old kid
second in line to the throne,
who's not a diplomat, like to, he had to almost do like some phone negotiations. Like the Greens are seasoned. Like they're like, we know we can't just come and say, hey, follow us. Like we'll give you some power. Like, whereas she's like, hey, here's an oath you gave, which, people follow, but you have to have something to offer in return. And Luke just wasn't, that's probably the most unbelievable part, is that she sent both her kids out in a time like this. Was quite stupid.
Well, given that one is the heir to the throne and second is the second.
Yeah. And he's the heir to Driftmark.
It similarly feels like what happened at the end of the last episode, where it's like, this is kind of,
it wasn't as bad. It wasn't as bad.
Like, and also swear an oath that you won't fight. Like,
yeah. Well, he didn't. To be fair, he didn't.
Didn't he?
Well,
I don't know. Again, like, perception is all that matters now, right?
Yeah.
Because
Vagar
felt threatened, and Aemon couldn't control the dragon. Like,
the other thing that's interesting is, like, is it going to be all Aemon's retelling? And the question is Aemon going to be honest or not? Which may not matter, but it will matter, at least in how he's received by his own family. And the second thing is, like, could people from Storm's End see the battle? That's also unclear.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's and again, like, that's what we don't know, because the way the episode ends, literally with him killing Luke, we don't know anything. We don't know. I mean, the show is going to pick right up. It's not going to pick right up where the season ended. I don't think it'll pick up maybe a month or two later or something. Yeah. But I will be curious
to see, rallying the troops.
Right. I'll be curious to see like who saw what, and again, because it's this moment. This is where the show changes. Like, this is where the narrative changes. This is where the war begins. This is the inciting incident, I feel like, of the war, right? Or at least the moment that breaks the camel's back or the dragon's back.
Yeah, like this is the moment that's going to, I think, make the reconciliation that I think we all deep down want between Alicent and Rhaenyra to happen impossible.
Right, I agree. And yeah, it doesn't matter what Aemon says. I'm sure he's, his dragon killed Luke either way. Like, it's
and so I think the Aemon thing is just like, does he become more sorry or sympathetic for it, or does he just double down and just say, I fucked up and now I'm just going to kill them all? Like, it's really unclear. Like, because the fact that he seems so shocked shows that, okay, he actually has that capability in him to feel bad, which we hadn't really seen before, at least since he was a kid. But yeah, it could really go either way. I'm interested to see it. Obviously, it seems like next season will be essentially probably cover the 2-year span of the battles they have for supremacy. We're not going to be getting really major time jumps. So I think the cast we have is the cast we have plus new characters. So that'll at least be good for continuity's sake, which I think was the biggest issue with this season. I found was just trying to keep track of who the characters were, what their motivations were. So much needed to be like filled in between the lines. And like, we finally in this episode got a little bit with Luke, where we got to bond with him and care about him. And then, he got killed. But it was a tremendous finale. Like, those last 15 minutes especially were just masterful.
I completely agree. I think for me, the season didn't have to end on a cliffhanger, and it doesn't. I think it ends on kind of the logical moment where like we've essentially opened the door now. And, next season we're going to step through that door, if that makes sense. Like we're standing on the precipice here of something I think a lot more exciting and interesting. I liked the way the season ended. I think this was a good season of TV. I don't think it's like an amazing season of TV. I think there's a lot of narrative problems that I hope the second and third season address, like these time jumps. I mean, I know the Dance of the Dragons, blah, 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 4 seasons, blah, blah, blah. Fine. They're going to do what they're going to do, regardless of what they say they're going to do. And so I will be curious to see what they end up doing with the time jumps and time lapse with this story, because this season is one of the stranger seasons of mainstream television I've ever seen because of how disjointed the narrative is. From a storytelling perspective, it's very disjointed.
It's basically trying to give us like background to the first shot of the Dance of Dragons. Like this was almost like a prequel to the prequel. I don't know if that's a silly way to say it, but like
we had to know about all these moving pieces to understand the moment when Aemond kills Luke, even if it's by accident, we have to know what that means. And they had to show us all of this to get to that point.
I mean, maybe not all of it, but yeah,
they think they had to show us all of it.
Yeah. And
even if it's not for this scene, it's at least for what comes after, like the Eric brothers, like maybe the White Worm, like that's all stuff that has big, I would assume bigger implications for the future of the show and the way they tell.
If we never see the White Worm again, that wouldn't be so bad.
They could recast her.
Yeah. Make her one of the third Eric brother. So yeah, I mean, it seems like next season we're going to see a bit of the Lannisters. We'll definitely see the Starks, probably more Baratheons. And then like, I'm really, really intrigued just to see, I want to see Alicent and Rhaenyra in the same room or in some sort of communication now, because it's that and like how Aemond spins the story, I think, are the immediate things I want to see. And then obviously we're going to have a lot of dragons fighting afterwards. But to Damon's point, it does seem like artillery-wise, they have a lot more firepower, pun intended. Like they're gonna have more dragons, whereas the Greens are gonna have more like foot soldiers.
Right. Well, and again, it comes down to a matter of how do you want to win the war, right? Do you want to win the war by burning everything to the ground, or do you want to win the war by trying to be civil and diplomatic? I think that there are, different. I think that both ways of looking at it have their value, and I think that now one of those, like you mentioned, one of those options is no longer tenable. Okay. So. And because it's no longer tenable because of what happens at the end of the season, like you said, we're going to get to see some lines being drawn, some characters getting to do more, say more. Damon's probably going to have everybody's going to have a bigger part in this show because now the pieces have been placed. Now we're going to see the pieces move around as opposed to just having to like jump forward 30 years in one season, which is really what happened. It's fucking insane.
Yeah, it is.
It's really insane how long this show has jumped in the span of 10 episodes. Like it's a lot.
And to like bring it to what we spoke about, I think last episode, Lord of the Rings like took like thousands of years and compressed it into like, it seems like decades now. And like this first season was probably like less than a year or two. Whereas they've sort of gone the opposite direction with
I think that Lord of the Rings show takes place over like a week, maybe like a couple days.
Really?
That first season so far, it's taken, but it's 3,000 years before.
Well, it's supposed, but they.
But that's the thing about this show that show does better is that show has a better wrangle on. That show has 20 years of story that it needs to tell in 5 seasons. This show had 30 years of story that it needed to inform us of with 10 episodes so that it could tell us 4 seasons of the actual story. It's very strange. And I don't know how well it works. Again, I think it remains to be seen how well it will work when the rest of the show comes out. If this season feels like kind of a missed opportunity, or if this feels like kind of the only way they could do it, I don't know. I think, like I said, once the show is kind of done and over and we can kind of look at it holistically, I think we'll have a better idea. But this season, good, not great, some great episodes, scattered throughout, but that time jumping stuff I think just really took me out of it, and it made it really hard for me to get realistically attached or invested in any of the characters.
Yeah, I mean, well, not any. I mean, Rhaenyra,
but she's not. It's like it's I don't know. Like it's hard for me to even get invested in her because she changed actresses halfway through the season.
Yeah, that one didn't bother me as much, but I agree. Like generally, it was hard to connect with the main characters. I would say a lot of the issues were around that middle transition period, but it definitely saved the best for last. I would say it started really strong and then it ended really strong. And that's probably what we're going to remember. And I'm feeling relatively confident that next season will probably be better because of the time issues we were talking about aren't really at play now. So
we got to see Aemond and Aegon as kids for 2 episodes.
And we never, and we still don't really understand the relationship. I mean, we will never understand the relationship with their father. We sort of understand the relationship with their mother, but not really. And so I think that would be something that would be serviced hopefully more.
I hope so. I mean, again, they're all grown up now, so we should be able to understand how they interact with each other in kind of a more substantive way now, given that they're adults as opposed to like teenage kids. But I don't know. It's just, I feel like there were some things that they did right this season and some things that they did wrong. And the things that they did wrong are almost entirely associated with the time jump and how they handled it. But again, like I said, we make it to the end of the show and go, well, that's the only way they could have done it. Like that it is what it is, as they would say. So,
and like, despite the complaints, like we both agree was a successful season of TV. Like,
I think it did a pretty good job in redeeming the show for me, at least.
Yeah,
making me interested and excited to watch another season of this show, which is not something I didn't even want to watch this show to begin with.
I wasn't that excited coming into it either, but there's something about it. I don't know if the dragons, I don't know if it's, the light incest. I don't know if it's their own version of Stop the Steal, but it's all just incredibly intriguing and like you want more. Like there's something about the way it's done. It's like you just want more. And before I forget, the Triarchy got one last shout out.
Yeah, crab feeder finally like, and we fucking routed those dickheads. The end.
It's like, I was like, the Triarchy has got to be top 2 Game of Thrones villain. Off screen the whole time.
Right. We're on to somebody else now. Goodbye. Like, all right.
It's fine. They have the Stepstones basically.
That's all you needed to know.
Yeah. I mean, they could have easily just said we control the Stepstones because we have a big navy, but it's fine.
I like that table though. That table's cool. Completely,
that table was sick.
Completely unnecessary, and also like very fantasy magic. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. That table will be in some nerd's home soon, I'm sure.
Right. How to build your own lit up table. I'm more asking where was that table in the first iteration of Game of Thrones? Because they were in Dragonstone a lot in those last couple seasons.
Well, I was reading the line. Apparently, that was the same one Stannis was using. He just didn't light it up.
Yeah, fuck you then. Fuck you and fuck your fucking storytelling then. If that's the answer. Oh, he just didn't light up the light up table that only is useful if you light it up. All right.
Wait, it's like Stannis. Weren't you all into the Lord of the Light?
Yeah, weren't you into burning people like your...
He was too busy lighting up his daughter, bro.
Yeah. Shireen, bro.
Big L.
The Azor Ahai. You are not him. You are not the Azor Ahai. Thank you for playing. Yeah, no, I think for me, all this season had to do was get me to watch the next season. And as far as I'm concerned, it was a massive success in that regard. Because it more or less has made me forget about how piss poor the last time I watched Game of Thrones was.
Yeah, it did have actually some of the problems the final season of Game of Thrones had, but I think and maybe it's unfair because this has another season after to like deal with, you know what I mean? It's not like they just ended it, but whatever. I mean, that's just the way it is. It did have some of the similar issues, but I think it overcame them, and I'm interested to see where it goes.
I agree. So we don't know the next time we're going to be bringing you this show. Could be a year from now, but probably 2. I would assume 2 years from now is when we'll be talking about Game of Thrones again. I don't know any more than you do. We don't work on the show, and if we did, we'd know.
I need my fix next year.
Are we going to be getting Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings on at the same time in perpetuitum?
Lord of the Rings should be next year, right?
No, Lord of the Rings is like 2024.
Oh, is it?
Probably.
I thought they were shooting all those because Amazon I think wants to churn them out. So I don't know. My point is HBO is a little bit more lax with release dates, I find.
Yeah, they love doing split seasons too.
Split seasons are like 2 years between successions, 3 years between successions. Whereas I feel like Amazon generally is better about that.
Was it 4 years between the first and second season of Westworld? It was something crazy. One of those Westworld was like almost 4 years, I think.
Not between 1 and 2. I think you mean between
2 and 3.
3, yeah. I mean, Succession was like 3
That's a
years.
good show.
It's just, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to get into it. My feelings on Westworld, but
why not? I like that show.
I think season 1 was an okay circle jerk, and then season 2 was just
a circle jerk of immense proportions.
Was just like
the circle jerk of all the circle jerk to end all circle jerks.
It's just it wanted to be so much deeper. Like it wanted to be like, look how interesting we are. Like, oh, what does it mean to be human? Oh, this character, they're a robot. Oh, this other character, they're also a robot. Oh, this other character, like it's like that was their Deus Ex Machina. Is just like anytime you need someone to do something that doesn't make sense, oh, they're a robot now. And I was
or
like,
they're a robo,
bro.
or in the later seasons, robo clones, or robots or who. Now it's not what robot is it, but what little acorn do they have in their head? That's the No, it's a Nolan. Yeah. Jonathan Nolan is not like his brother. Jonathan Nolan is more like J.J. Abrams. Like cut from that same mystery box cloth. So
yeah. So I mean, if people like Westworld, great. I mean, it looks beautiful, amazing cast. They obviously spent a lot of money on it. I just after season 2 was like, I can't do this anymore.
It's valid. I mean, hey, after that last season of Game of Thrones, I was like, I'm never watching another Game of Thrones show, but here we are. So
with a podcast,
with a fucking podcast. But yeah, hey, at least it's only 10 episodes every 2 years, and 2 years from now we'll do this again. Maybe we'll do something in between. Who knows?
Do you think dragons have incest? That would bring it all, circular. If they just have like the brother and sister dragons just like fucking to pump out new dragon eggs.
And then the dragons are like horribly mutated, like
and it's a T-Rex.
Yeah, exactly. Dragon can't flap its wings, so it just kind of drags them on the ground. Like, yeah. It's only okay for the humans. So I guess until the next time you hear us coming into your ear holes deep, where can people find you, Yashar?
I don't think anyone wants us coming into their ear holes.
I don't know what people are into. I don't
kink shame. I don't kink shame you right.
You're yucking someone's yum right now.
I am yucking someone's yum. I'm sorry.
Are you a yum yucker, boy?
Yes. Yes, I am a yum yucker. You can't. I don't know where you can find me. Nowhere. But
good. Wait, 10 episodes in a row or 9 episodes in a row, and still can't find you.
I'm basically Laris.
I thought you were going to say I'm basically basic.
Oh no, I was going to say send me feet pics to my non-existent Twitter account.
Oh, that's fair. Slide into my DMs. We'll have a raucous discussion about Kanye West and his belief system. Me and you. Let's do it on Twitter.
Oh,
yay! It must be yay. I can't believe it's yay, and neither can he. As for me, you can find me.
When is he running for senator?
God.
I mean, that's next, right?
Yeah. Well, he's already run for president, so
that's true.
Yeah. Don't forget, he's already done it, and people actually voted for him.
Oh, yes.
Shocking. As for me, cstatue.com. Well, actually, as for me, weirdingwaymedia.com. That's my podcast network that I set up with Mike White at the projection booth. And we have 19 shows and counting, including this one. So go and check those shows out over at weirdingwaymedia.com. As for this show, Game of Bros on all podcast platforms. And like I said, we may do more with this show. We may just leave it as an every 2-year project. Who knows? Only we do, and we don't know when we're going to be doing this again. So until the next time you hear us, give us a dragon roar to end the season, boyo.
That's what I was thinking.
Vast improvement from the beginning of the season.